in line is Dr. Manas Shome. Manas is a DevOps consultant and evangelist, a thought leader, author, and patent holder in TCS. He has spent more than 23 years in the industry and has worked in managing large engagements, creating and sustaining industry leading assets, and mentoring. His current work encompasses DevOps and seamless business IT interfaces, AI, and the cognitive enterprise. Dr. Manas joins us today to share his deep thoughts on a working model that brings in integration of systems and models that can successfully map IT to business. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hearts and souls together for Dr. Manas Shome, joining us all the way from Kolkata.
This is Dr. Manas Shome. I am a DevOps evangelist and a consultant with Tata Consultancy Services Limited. And I am a thought leader, an author, and a patent holder in the field. So today we will talk about the 8 arms of BizDevOps. Now, what are 8 arms of BizDevOps? It's an interesting topic. So let's go through it. Let's delve in. Okay. Now, if we look at BizDevOps, we are talking about enterprise agility. Now, when we talk about enterprise agility, it is not about just the IT agility that traditionally IT firms, IT investments across the industry verticals have been trying to do and have achieved quite well. But it's also about business agility coming into the play. So enterprise agility is your business agility plus your IT agility. How do you ensure that? So the questions are how to know if business is agile enough and quickly adjust to change. So can we gauge that using the IT infrastructure that is already in place and working fine? And so that's the second question. Can IT help? Now, if we look at the typical operating model in a given business or in an industry vertical, we talk about a few stakeholders like your suppliers, your regulators, etc. And then in the middle, you have a set of line functions supported by a few staff functions. So that's the traditional model of how businesses run and are still running. So when we talk about the core part of the business, the line functions will typically talk about the inbound logistics into the business. We talk about the core operations of the business and the outbound logistics. So in banking and finance, your inbound logistics will be your customer data, the accounts they're opening, the money that gets deposited, right? So that's a retail banking scenario. And your operations would be to process them, authorize transactions, authorize customers, and then get transactions through, detect fraud, etc. And then outbound logistics, you're having these outcomes, right? Where the customers have access to the portal, they get the services rendered, and they actually have those experiences. So that's your outbound logistics. And we also talk about marketing and sales, plus your services and support as very core components of this entire line function. Even though you can talk about marketing and sales as a separate function, but then we take it as a line function today, given the kind of impetus or customer dynamics that are in play in the marketplace. And services and support definitely, because unless you have a very strong services and support, your core operations may not actually go through very well on a sustained basis. So we are talking about sustainability there. Now, when we talk about this business, there are these core objectives that go over to your consumers, to your stakeholders, to your regulatory, and to the community as such, and to your own business, where you are trying to maximize your profits or maximize people welfare, etc. There are supporting functions of which enterprise infrastructure, information technology becomes a part. But can information technology as a base help you in establishing business agility and measuring business agility? So we'll talk about it now. Now, the other dimension that we will be also looking at or actually have in question is this. We are talking about the next gen of businesses, where businesses are getting into cognitive aspects and observability, etc. So in case of banks, I'm just taking an example of banks. It is extendable to telecom, extendable to retail, extendable to all our different industry verticals. But say we talk about cognitive banks. Now, if we need to achieve a state of cognitive banking scenario, so we would look at BFSI functions like where BFSI is your banking, financial services, and insurance. The functions may be across retail banking, lending, commercial banking, foreign currency exchange, tax and audit, insurance, etc., etc. Now you have these functions in place, traditionally done using a lot of manual interventions, a lot of functions that are built on your IT platforms. And then what you're trying to achieve are your predictive analytics, your prescriptive analytics, and action layer, where based on the analytics, it is not just the decision making, but based on the decisions, can the bank take its own decision? Can the machines in the bank do their own decisions? And then the action feedback and rationalization layer, where based on different parameters, analytics, you are not only acting on a certain you have not only automated using, say, machine learning or deep learning algorithms, a certain part of your business, but you are also taking in active feedback every day and seeing if we can rationalize the entire business space, if you can rationalize your applications, rationalize your business functions, etc. So optimizing your business, optimizing your costs. So with those cognitive functions in place, what should come in between that will help you effectively measure how your BFSI functions are with respect to your cognitive functions or the achieving certain set of cognitive functions in your industry? So what are those things that help you do that mapping and help you achieve that? Now, coming to the concept of BizDevOps, what we have seen across the industry there are 8 key parameters, the 8 arms of the BizDevOps spider. We call it a spider, it looks like a spider, and we call it these 8 arms of the BizDevOps spider. So essentially, what are these 8 arms? Your portfolio resilience. So how resilient is your portfolio today? Can we measure it using your IT, existing IT, or enhancing your IT to a certain extent? Portfolio costs. How well are you managing your costs across your portfolios? WIP inventory. So work in progress actually adds on to your costs, adds on to the time, valuable time of your manpower. So how does your WIP inventory look like? Your functional modularity. How modular are your business functions today? How well can you establish that? And on the right-hand side, so these are the left-hand side stuff, which is more to do with the business side of things. On the right-hand side are something where IT also has a lot of impact. So the first thing is about reliability. How reliable are your systems? Security. How secure are your systems? Not only your IT systems, but what is the impact on your overall business systems, your business functions? The customer experience. Now, there are several parameters that can define customer experience, and contextually that can vary across your industries, right? And then your system resilience. So how resilient are your systems in case of failures, in case of a disaster that can come in? When we are talking of a system, we are talking of business, the entire enterprise as a system. Okay, so those are the 8 arms of BizDevOps we will be talking about at length. Now, when we started thinking about these BizDevOps arms and experimenting them with the data that we had in our hand and started implementing them for some of our customer organizations, we found that there is a lot of correlation between how your IT systems perform and how your businesses are performing across all these different parameters. Now, when we try to find this correlation, there are variations across the industry verticals. Nevertheless, we found that overall, we can actually draw up a chart and we can work upon that based on your industry context on how these different IT metrics have an impact on your business metrics. So when we talk about these 8 arms that you see at the top across the columns, we are talking about regulatory, we are talking about security, we are talking about customer experience, we're talking about system resilience, functional modularity, WIP inventory, and so on and so forth. So the 8 arms of BizDevOps. And when we talk about the metrics, we are essentially talking about a few IT metrics in place that you would be already measuring in your organization. We're essentially talking about release frequency, the cycle time to build and to deploy, MTBF, which is mean time between failures, change success ratios of how well your changes are successful once they have rolled out into production, the availability of your systems, the load performance of your systems, reliability of the systems, scalability of the systems, database integrity of the system. So database, obviously, it's all data driven. So database becomes so important. Security issues that you're facing day in and day out, and regulatory issues that are creeping in across your IT systems. Now, when we look at these metrics, which are more IT-centric metrics that you see, they help us in a certain combinatorial fashion gauge how your business is performing across the 8 arms of BizDevOps. So if you look at this particular chart, when we talk about regulatory compliance of your business, we see that based on your change success ratio, based on your database integrity, based on your regulatory issues that are coming in, obviously, because that is having a direct impact on your regulatory compliance. If we take this combination, it helps you, based on the certain set of correlation that exists, it helps you gauge how you are doing from a regulatory compliance perspective across your business. So you may not be measuring every time your business regulatory compliance from a business perspective, but you would be definitely doing that when it comes to IT, because you would have your SOX compliance in place, you would have your Data Protection Acts compliance in place, you may have something like industry domain-based standards like HIPAA for healthcare, etc., etc. So based on those kind of scenarios, you can actually do that mapping and correlation. So looking at security in the second instance, but as a second example here, we are talking about availability, reliability, database integrity, and security issues as something that has a lot of bearing on how well you can measure your security aspect of the business. Similarly, for customer experience, there are so many functions or IT variables, IT metrics that can actually map to your customer experience. Similarly, for system resilience, for functional modularity, etc., etc. Okay, so when we started talking about this across the industry, we did get a lot of correlation from these IT metrics to the business metrics across your BFSI organizations, across retail organizations, across telecom organizations, and so on and so forth. So there are so many different industry verticals where we did this study when we started talking about BizDevOps and implementing them. Now, how to go about doing that kind of a mapping? Now, when we do a mapping from your IT infrastructure, okay, to or rather your IT metrics to your business metrics. Now, how do you organize all these different things? Now, you have your IT data coming out of your tool chains, IT data coming out of your logs, but then there is a lot of IT data or IT metrics that actually comes out of your third parties. So on the left-hand side, now part of this grand design, we are trying to do a grand design through which you can realize these mapping from IT metrics to your business metrics. So when we look at it, there are two kinds of sources or types of sources for your IT metrics. One is your data pull and push from the IT tool chains, including the logs, as I said, and then the manual or third-party data feed, okay, that happens day in and day out, okay, for systems which are not on your pipelines. For example, you may have your DevOps pipelines, you may have a lot of data coming in from your pipelines through your lifecycle management tools, either application lifecycle or database lifecycle management tools, through your continuous integration and continuous delivery kind of platforms that you're using, through your infrastructure as a service that you have implemented, platform as a service that you have implemented, containers, etc. All the different things where you can get data from. And then your manual and third-party data feed that are mostly manual because they have not hopped on to your pipelines. That is the core part of the inputs that are coming in from the IT. When you take it, okay, into your data store, so you have a data store, okay, and that data store actually pulls in that data, the IT pipeline data there. Now, what are the other types of data that you actually need to actually start doing that kind of a mapping? We are essentially talking about three core databases, broad databases. Okay, there are maybe more, but then what we have seen across the industry, three core databases are very much required. So first one is your domain standards database. In this case, we are talking about BFSI because I have been for some time working in this BFSI industry vertical, but then your domain standards database has to be there. You have to maintain it mostly dynamically based on the inputs that are coming in from the domain. And a lot of industry standards are already established across. For example, you have your frameworks. For BFSI, you have the BIAN framework, BIAN. And similarly, you have your frameworks, you have your set of standards for your industry. It can be healthcare, retail, etc. The second database that is important is your architecture standards database. Now, architecture standards database is not about just your IT architecture standards. It is about the entire enterprise architecture standards that we are talking about. We are talking about all the different layers you have there, your business architecture, your application architecture, your database architectures, your technology architecture, deployment architecture, etc. Okay, so you need to have your architecture standards database as your reference to which you will start doing that mapping. The third one is your regulatory compliance database. Now, regulatory compliance database, actually we have mentioned it a little separately because it has a lot of bearing on how your business can perform in a given context, in a given geography, in a given country setting, in a given set of regulations that come out of the different governments that are supporting your business, right? So they have a lot of bearing, okay, on the success of your business. So while we talk of these three core databases, you may want to have your security database separately, even though it can also get in your architecture standards database as one of the big components, okay? But then it depends upon your specific context on what additional databases you may want to bring in to do that mapping. Now, once you start doing that mapping, what are the data you are actually collecting into your data store? Apart from the data that is coming from the IT metrics, you are talking about portfolio aggregated data. Okay, so you're aggregating all the data that are coming from your business, from your domain standards, from your architecture standards, from your regulatory compliance, from the IT metrics side of things into aggregating for your portfolio. Okay, so can we do that? Yes, we can do that. So I will quickly show you how we have done it. Okay, so you aggregate all this different data at a portfolio level so that it helps you measure how the portfolio is performing in terms of those 8 terms that we talked about. And then the enterprise aggregated data. So how do you actually gauge your performance, your BizDevOps based performance for your enterprise as a whole, taking all the portfolios into consideration? So you have to actually aggregate that data based on your context. Now, once you have done that on your data store, the representation of that data store over your reporting platforms, etc., can be either descriptive to start with. Okay, so if you are just starting on this journey, you may want to have descriptive ways to look at your data instead of actually the machine predicting you anything. And then obviously the second level is having predictive data analytics. Okay, so you can predict certain outcomes based on the IT metrics that are coming in because you have already mapped it in your data store. You've already mapped your IT metrics to your business metrics, given all these different databases, given the inputs that are coming in, and based on the mapping of the data, that the way I showed in the previous table, okay, IT metrics versus business, 8 terms of the business metrics. Based on that, you can actually predict certain outcomes based on the data that is coming from your IT systems. And at the third level, you can actually be prescriptive. The machine can actually prescribe what needs to be done in a certain scenario. Now, whether you want to pull in certain bots in your system to actually take care of those things, something like AI ops, something like ML ops kind of scenarios, where the machine can actually do an action and take an action on a specific business problem. Okay, so the representation can be either descriptive or predictive or prescriptive based on at the maturity level that you're achieving, implementing this kind of a grand design and establishing a BizDevOps way to look at things, way to look at your enterprise performance. Okay, now while we are doing it, this is a very quick view, okay, of how this thing can work. Now, if you look at this diagram, it's a dynamic one. If you look closely into this diagram, the numbers are actually changing. You have these 8 arms of BizDevOps: your portfolio resilience, your portfolio costs, your WIP inventory, the functional modularity, regulatory, security, customer experience, and then system resilience. Now, for each of these parameters, you will see that with time, okay, this is a time lapse kind of a thing that I have shown you here. With time, the business performance for a given arm or parameter for your portfolio actually changes. The first one is biz, which is your business performance, and the IT alignment is being shown. So how well is IT aligned to your business? So that actually gives a real-time view of how well your IT is mapping to your business. Okay, so for example, it's kind of stuck here at this video. So if you look at your portfolio resilience, business performance is at a 40%, which is pretty low. So that's why you see it in red. But then IT alignment is also 49%. So you need to take this data with a pinch of salt. Okay. Now, whereas for security, the business performance is very high at 97%. Okay. Now, What is 97%? What is 40%? Again, the definition will be based on your industry context, but definitely that can be defined. In this case, we have done a certain definition in the background for BFSI organizations that we are working with. So Biz being at 97%, IT alignment being at 90% is something which shows that the IT alignment to security is pretty high, and that has also resulted in a very high business performance. Okay. Now, so IT is actually helping the business to achieve a certain level of security compliance pretty well in this case. Okay. But if you look at system resilience, the last one that you see here across this parameter, we say that business performance is 97%, but IT alignment is 60%. Now, obviously, the figures are getting changed, but then let's take a figure which you can see pretty well. So now, if your business performance seems to be low, but your IT alignment is high, now in your system resilience, business performance is 41%, but IT alignment is 63%. That essentially says that even though IT alignment is pretty high, the business actual performance is low. So hence, IT is not able to actually bring in the right effective efficacies to your business. So IT needs to improve on ensuring that your business is performing. But it can be the other way around. Your business performance is pretty high, but IT alignment is pretty low. That essentially means that your IT is not very much aligned to business, but business functions through a manual way or whatever, or through some heroism, is able to establish a very good performance. So that is a case of business performance is being very high, but IT alignment being quite low. Okay. So one of these examples is your WIP inventory. The IT alignment is at 59%, but your business is at 82%. So this essentially means IT is not so much aligned with this business function, ensuring your WIP inventory. The correlation is pretty low at 59%, but then your business performance is high at 82%, relatively high. So that means business, some way or the other, is able to maintain a very good WIP inventory, okay, at least at an average level. Now, the other way around is looking at system resilience figures here. Your business is at 43%, IT alignment at 88%. So IT is pretty well aligned to your business, but somehow business is not able to perform. So that means there is something lacking the way your IT is handling the performance at an enterprise level. So something that can be improved from an IT standpoint. So in this case, for system resilience, your IT alignment is good. So IT needs to improve so that your business performs well. But on the other hand, for the WIP inventory, the IT alignment is low, but your business performance is pretty high. So why don't we look at IT and see what better can be built so that it has a lot of alignment to business, so that business still can perform much, much better. Okay, so those are the outcomes at a nutshell level, at a very high level, that we can actually derive when we start mapping your IT metrics to your business metrics, that helps you achieve certain business agility and gets into the cognitive way of doing things at a very mature stage. So this is what we wanted to talk about BizDevOps, the way you start looking at your IT metrics, the way you map them to your business metrics, see how they're correlated, measure the efficiencies of your business functions, and improve upon them using your IT parameters in the background. Okay. Now, we had been doing this for some of our customers pretty well. And while we had been doing this, we have seen a marked improvement in customer organizations, business functions, the business performance as well, apart from IT performance. It's not always a question of your IT is performing so good, but then whether it is impacting my business, whether it makes any difference to my business. So to ensure that, this kind of framework actually helps a lot. A spider framework, which helps you to achieve that. Okay. So now when we talk about how do you look at it at an enterprise level? Okay. Now this is a static view that I'm giving you, not a real-time view as the last one that you saw, but then this kind of gives you a feel of how this entire scenario can be rolled up into an enterprise level. So if you look at the enterprise level, we would have your core services, which may be the vendor supply chains. You may have your core operations. You may have your customer core services. Those are the main functions at the top, and then followed by your internal support services, your MIS or management systems and analytics kind of systems, security and risk management systems, and then compliance and audit systems. Now, in these scenarios, they are well connected across each other in a different number of ways by by different kinds of data flow. But then, what it essentially shows, it talks about the kind of technology, underlying technology stacks that are there for the systems. This is a very simplified view. Things can go very complex. And then for these kind of, say, claim services as a function under these core services, how do they look based on their overall performance? Okay. So there are certain nomenclatures that are there on this particular symbol and this particular symbol, where it shows how well the performance is being achieved from a business side of things. So this is your IT performance. If you look at claim services here, the red one is your IT performance, whereas this yellow one is your business performance, which essentially says that even though the IT alignment, not the IT performance. So your IT alignment may be low, it's at red, but your business performance is high. So can we make IT more aligned to the business in this case? Here, it is an extreme case. But then again, if you look at here, your business is in green, your IT alignment is in yellow. Okay, so that is how you start reading these kind of large scenarios across your enterprise based on how you have mapped your IT metrics to your business metrics. Okay, so this is how we do it for our customers from a BizDevOps standpoint. And these 8 arms of BizDevOps has actually helped us in achieving certain levels of business performance, improvements in business performance, just utilizing the overall IT infrastructure, the IT metrics, the IT ways of doing, the way IT divisions are running and helping their businesses. So that kind of ends my talk. Thank you.